What's up, everybody? This video is from Eoin16. He is 4-tabling NL10 on stars. I finally wised up and made a little always on top script so that we can have the HUD stats up there without disappearing anymore. In the lower left, in the starting frame, it looks like we raised a 9-7 suited on the button and got called by two guys. The one in the small blind looks kind of fishy, although we don't have too many hands on him. Maybe a little bit on the loose passive side. The other guy, we don't know much about. He's not full stack either, though. But on this board, three ways. Obviously, you're going to get called by pocket pairs. You're going to get at least called by jacks, flush draws, whatever. And there are two guys. But I think you can still profitably c-bet here. I think when there's three people in the pot, you're not going to get called by stuff like ace high nearly as often as when it's heads up. So it somewhat compensates for the fact that you have to get them both to fold. And the other thing of it is, even though your hand looks like total junk, it actually has a decent amount of equity versus the range that these guys will call you with. Because a pretty big chunk of their continuing range on the flop is going to be stuff like small and medium pocket pairs, and you actually have overcards to a lot of that. And pretty good overcards too, in that, like, say one of them has pocket fives, calls on the flop, and you hit a 9 on the turn. Well, the 9 isn't really nearly as scary to them as like an ace, king, queen, whatever. From their point of view, it's not that likely that it hit you, or it doesn't look as scary as, So I think the combination of the fact that they'll probably play fairly straightforward and miss this board a lot, the fact that you have some equity versus their continuing range, put together, even though they might be a little fishy and there's two of them, I think that's still probably a profitable c-bet. Okay, so we elect to check back, and there's a third jack on the turn, which is kind of interesting if it checks to us. But in this case, if it does check to us, I like checking again, because I think that even though when they both check, which is what happens, obviously the ranges aren't that strong, but at the same time, you're going to get called by a wider range on the turn than you would on the flop, because even a fish is intuitively going to kind of understand that if you have something, you're probably going to bet on the flop. So, when they do have hands like ace 10, ace queen, whatever, just kind of like the ace high marginal hands, like, they're definitely not gonna fold to your bet on the turn, whereas they probably would have on the flop. And also, they can still have small pairs, even though they would bet them some of the time on the turn. And when they do, you don't have the same equity against their continuing range now that you would on the flop, because there's only one card to come, whereas before you would have probably, check back turn and get an extra card out of it. Okay, and it's a pretty strange river. It quads up the board, and this guy's calling range on the turn, it's going to be mostly ace high and pocket pairs. Obviously he could have had a jack, but he can't anymore since all the jacks are out. So mostly, like, if you bet here, you're going to get a hand that you already beat to fold, like a small pocket pair, unless he's just like super duper stupid or drunk or something and doesn't realize his hand doesn't play, or you're gonna be betting into the nuts, which obviously isn't gonna fold. So there isn't much point in betting the river there, and you are gonna be ahead some of the time. And as it turns out, he flopped twos full of jacks, and we ran him down with 9 high somehow, which is fairly amusing. I don't hate that turn. Thinking about it, I don't hate the bet on the turn. It's, because a lot of times they're still going to have hands like just some random whatever that they're gonna. A lot of the range they're gonna fold, even if they don't feel like you have a lot there. So, it's not like it's terrible or anything. But I would have much rather bet the flop than the turn as a bluff. Okay, upper left, we open 6-4 offsuit on the button, which I think is fine in this situation. You've got one guy that's been here 6 hands and hasn't played one yet, and the other one, it's hard to make out exactly what his stats are, but they're both single digit. So, between the two guys, they've played like 1 or 2 hands out of 18 so far. So, yeah, I think, just stealing every button, or nearly every button against them is fine. And you've got a pretty good setup on that table. You've got 2 guys that are kind of loose, fishy looking maybe on your right, and then you've got 2 nitty guys on your left that you'll be able to steal blinds from. So it's definitely a very nice seat that you have there. Okay, upper left, this guy opens for pot under the gun, and we have ace-king. Now, against some guys, I might call with there just because they'll have very strong ranges under the gun, and in turn, I will be representing a super strong range by 3-betting there from middle position with all these people behind against a strong range. But in this isn't one of those cases. This guy is 39-22. He's opening wide. He's going to continue with a lot of stupid hands, probably make a lot of mistakes. So that's just a very easy race for buy there. The guy's probably not very positional aware either. Okay, in the upper left, we've got a guy that opened on the button. He's only played 15 hands so far, but he's been pretty aggressive so far. He's 53-40, so he could be a reg that just a tighter guy or normal stats guy that just picked up a few hands, but he might be kind of on the laggy side. 53-40 is pretty loose, even though it's a small sample. But anyway. I really don't like this 3-bet here because like if he does kind of turn out to be on the looser aggro side, like just say we had 50 hands on him and he had those stats, like, you know, a lot of times these guys that are like real aggro and real loose, they're just going to be like spewy throughout the hand. Like, even though they have a wide range to start with, that doesn't mean they're going to be folding a bunch of it, even though that they probably should. So, you know, at this point, like with what information we have on them now, if I made any adjustment at all to my normal 3-betting range, it would probably be to 3-bet wider for value, because I would be suspicious that that this guy is going to be kind of spewy. So I definitely don't like 3-betting there with a Jack-9 offsuit, because I would expect to get called and or raised a decent amount, and when called, I would expect him to be maybe kind of spewy and stubborn after the flop, which isn't very good with such a weak hand. Okay, and at the same time, on the lower right here, we open from the cutoff with ace-queen offsuit. A guy that's 22-18 with a 9% 3-bet us. And we don't have a real large sample on the guy. We have 149 hands, so you know, 3-bet is only so accurate over that. You know, I would imagine on average his range is fairly tight and has some semi-bluffs. I think in this case, I would probably call here in position. I don't mind folding just because I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of airing on the nitty side versus guys that you don't have a real big sample against. But you know, I think on average you'll probably show a little bit of a profit calling there in position with the hand as strong as ace-queen offsuit. Okay, lower left, a guy so far that's been kind of tight. You know, he's that's kind of hard for me to tell his stats too. It looks like he's a 10-0. So he hasn't raised a hand yet. He just limped in once and he limps in here again. So kind of tight passes so far. I don't like this isolate though, just because, you know, it would be pretty marginal anyway. Like, it's okay from the standpoint that this guy that limped in, he's probably has kind of a weak range, you know, maybe like pocket pairs or suited connectors, or you know, some like ace-2 suit, whatever, stuff like that, and it'll probably be just like check folding a bunch of flops. But our hand is pretty weak, and we have a pretty loose fishy guy behind us, so it's going to go multi-way a decent amount, and our hand is just going to be like, you know, it doesn't play very good multi-way. You're not going to be able to bluff a ton. I mean, you'll get heads up a decent amount of time, and the guy we're isolating is going to fold a decent amount, but it's not really, like, you're not really isolating if you have a fish that's going to come along a huge amount of the time. So you know, I think that hand is just a little too weak and a little too terrible multi-way that I don't really like that isolate there. And as it turns out, we do get called by the fish, but luckily we flop top pair anyway. Okay, in the lower right, we've got this guy. We've got 19 hands on him. He's 21-21. So far, his fold to 3-bet is 50%, which means it's probably like 1 out of 2. I don't like this 3-bet. I mean, I would expect his range to be, for opening, somewhat loose. But, I'm not going to 3-bet the guy like every single time he opens a hand. So, because, people do notice. So I'd like to be a little selective. And 4-8 suited is just, it's pretty weak. So, simply, even though he might fold a decent amount, like, how he reacts to 3-bets isn't going to be static. Like, once you 3-bet him a couple times, he's probably going to fold a lot less to them. So I definitely want to fold hands this week and have a little bit better equity with what I raise with, the times that he does call us. I'd like to have something better than 4-8. Or also, something, something that blocks some of the combos that he would continue with, which 4-8 also doesn't have that going for it. Here in the lower left, in the sky, min raises the button. 14 hands, he hasn't raised yet. He's limped a couple times. So he's just kind of like tight, unknown. The big blind is unknown. It's sat full stacked. Who knows about him? I think it's close between calling and folding, but I kind of like err towards folding just because this guy's been pretty tight passive. So I think just folding our king 10 suited out of position is okay. Upper left, we fold our flop a full house. It's three-handed. Like, if you're gonna bet there, you might as well. I mean, obviously we're gonna bet, but there really isn't much advantage to not just making it a really big bet because your range it looks about the same either way. You've got 3 guys. There's a fishy guy behind you. Betting like on the small side probably isn't going to get you any extra calls, so it's better just to go ahead and bet large. Upper right hand, we open king 9 suited from middle position. I think this is okay in this case for the same reason that we've been able to steal all these blinds. Like, we've got these guys behind us that have been like super nitty. There's also a guy that's in a small blind now that also looks like he's going to be pretty nitty, although we only have 22 hands on him, but he's 9-9 so far. So I'm definitely like opening up my range and adding hands like this from middle position on that table. So I think that's a pretty good open. And on the upper right, you get called by 2 of those guys and you get this board. This one's kind of tricky, but like if these guys are as tight as they look so far, they're folding a lot of their Broadway hands that kind of a fishier or looser player is going to call with. So I think the fact that you have a gut shot and an overcard and that these guys have more small pairs. Like, small pairs are a larger percentage of the range than most players would have. I think it's probably going to be okay to bet there. I mean, obviously, you're going to get called to raise a significant amount of the time, but I think they're going to fold often enough combined with your equity that it's probably okay to bet there just because of the nature of their pre-flop ranges. I do think it's somewhat close though. But I'm definitely not expecting these guys to be calling us with hands like, you know, King Jack, Queen Jack. You know, a lot of the stuff that would make that just a very easy give up versus a lot of players. Okay, upper left, this guy that's been real loose aggro so far opens in the cutoff, and we have a King 10 and 3-bet. This definitely isn't bad as before when we had the Jack 9 and we were out of position, because we have a better hand, we have position, so this is definitely like going to have a much better EV than that before. But here we also have the option of calling, and I think your hand actually stacks up well enough against his open range that I would probably rather just call there in position. And I don't, you know, and there's a fish in the small blind too. It's hard to say exactly how that affects our EV, but I'm not exactly, even though we don't have a great multi-way hand, you know, having that guy in the pot can't be too bad for our bottom line just because he looks like he's probably terrible. So overall, I think I like calling there a lot better than 3-betting. And on the upper right, we steal with a 5-8 offsuit. It's still fine, still the same tight guys there, no reason to stop. We flop second pair, and a gut shot. Better just to, I mean, you'll do better just betting there than you will checking. There's not going to be a ton of value in it against this guy, but you know, he still has pretty decent equity with just random overcard hands, and you know, it's a spot I might check back, like if I thought the guy was the kind of guy that is going to bluff turn and river enough that I'm pretty happy to just sit there and call him down after checking back, but this really isn't that kind of guy, so usually just rather bet there. And on the upper left, we had a King 9 suited. This guy that's been like super aggro so far opened up from middle position, and we folded our King 9 suited. Like, that's the one that I actually kind of like 3-betting there, because our hand maybe wasn't quite strong enough to call with. You know, actually calling might have even been okay too, but it's borderline. Calling is worth considering because it play decent multi-way and you get this fish in behind you a decent amount. But I liked that situation I thought that was a decent spot for 3-betting. I definitely like that kind of hand a lot more than, you know, stuff like Jack 9 offsuit, 4-8 suited, whatever. And this guy's raising so much, it's not like I really have a lot of respect for his range here. So I think it would be profitable. Calling might be profitable. I think 3-bet was probably definitely profitable in that spot. I don't like folding there too much. Lower right, we have jacks. We've got a regular on the button that we know is a regular, a guy with 22 hands that opens from the cutoff. He's 27-23 so far, and we have jacks. You know, and this might be a little debatable, but without knowing a ton about the guy that opened, like, I'd rather just 3-bet there. You know you have a better hand than the button, and just until I know more about someone, like, he does look kind of braggish. A lot of regs are paranoid about getting squeezed in this situation where, you know, he's in a stealing position, he gets called by another regular. Like, people will definitely make they'll probably a lot looser calls than they should and things like that. So I like raising there for value. I think it's fine. And it gets kind of interesting because they both call us, and the board comes King 6-5 with 2 hearts. Now this is one kind of situation where like whether or not I bet is going to depend mostly on whether or not I think betting is profitable, because I don't think that check folding is, you know, it's going to be close to break even. Obviously sometimes everybody's going to check around, you know, once in a while our hand will improve, you know, once in a while we'll get to showdown and improve with the best hand or whatever. But for the most part, checking is going to be not too far from break even. Somebody's going to get us off of the, you know, we can't just sit here and check call down out of position on this board, you know, in a 3-way pot. So if we bet, like, it's not one of those spots where, you know, it's like being in position on the river where you're thinking in terms of am I getting called by worse hands, am I getting better hands to fold. You know, it's more of a spot where you know, having some showdown value isn't all that important if it's very unlikely for us to get to showdown with the best hand. So we mostly just want to evaluate whether or not betting is profitable. I think in this case it's going to be really profitable. Like looking at the button, for instance, he has a pretty well-defined range. We have enough hands on him to know that his stats are probably fairly accurate, that he's a pretty standard regulish guy. So his range is just almost entirely pocket pairs. Like he doesn't have any King X in his range. Like his range for calling the cutoff open has some King X in it, but not for over calling a 3-bet. He's going to fold hands like King Queen, King Jack, whatever. And this Doom guy that opened originally, he's got a little bit of King X in his range, but not very much. Mostly just like, you know, he could have King Queen, although some of the time he'll fold it. He might have a King Jack suited. Well, a lot of the time he'll fold that. But most of the time when you bet here, they're both going to fold a lot. You know, you might get called, when you do get called by the guy that originally opened, like, you know, he can have like 8s, 9s, 10s a lot. So it's not like there's no value in betting either. But overall, they're just when you bet here, like the king hits your range so much stronger than it hits theirs that you know, if you bet like 250 here or something, just on the times that they both fold, it's going to be very profitable. So I like betting there and then just taking it from there. Let me stop it again real quick. With the 3-4 offsuit on the upper right, like this guy limped in the small blind, he's 23-12 so far. Well, he's usually not going to have a very strong hand, and you can usually profitably raise just about anything in position. You're never open folding, so you can't really compare the EV of the raise to 0, because free rolling with any 2 cards in the big blind is also going to be pretty profitable too. So I think with a hand as weak as 3-4 offsuit, you know, when you get down in like the very, you know, that's the very bottom of random hands or whatever, I think just free rolling on the big blind is probably going to be more profitable there. Okay, so we do bet about half pot on the bottom. We do get called by the original open, or, you know, his range is mostly going to be, like I say, King Queens, 8s, 9s, 10s. There isn't a ton of point to betting the turn. He's just going to fold the stuff that we beat and call with the stuff that we don't beat. Plus, we're not always, you know, it's not like he's always just going to, you know, bet with his worst hands once we check. We are going to get to showdown sometimes against those hands. So I like just checking the turn now. And on the river, it's kind of the same thing. But at this point, it might be worth making a small value bet just because, you know, it's very unlikely he doesn't bet a king on the turn. And you're never going to get raised bluffed. So, you know, his range is fairly well defined there. Usually he's just going to have a smaller pair than we do. So, you know, you can try a small bet. Most regulars at these games aren't, I mean, they're just not going to raise there with the worst hand. But they might be tempted to call if you make a small bet. So I don't think it could be terrible. I don't think checking is terrible either, but I might try to get something just because he's going to have a smaller pair than us so often. Lower left, this kind of weird guy that's been tight but is starting to look looser now. Min raises a button again. We call from the small blind with a king jack. I think that's fine. This guy's started playing more hands, and we've been seeing him do this. On this board, we have 2 overcards and a gut shot. It's kind of a spot where I wouldn't mind donking out. We've got a backdoor flush draw. So, you know, there's a lot of good things that can happen to us if we get aggressive here. Like, I definitely don't like check folding. I think I guess an opponent like this, I kind of like donking more than check raising. Like, I don't think this guy is ever, you know, a lot of regs will just spaz out and just like auto raise donk bets, or, you know, they do very unpredictable things. I think in this case, it's with this guy's, you know, 33-11, whatever. I don't think that's going to happen a lot. I don't think he's going to raise you with anything other than strong hands and maybe strong draws. So I really like just donking out there. And as it plays out, you know, I'd still rather check raise than check fold, just because I think we have enough equity. But I really like just betting out there. Like, I don't think you're, even against min raises, like, it's pretty hard to make a profit calling out a position if we're check folding hands as strong as, like, 2 overs and a gut shot. Here on the upper left, we elected to check behind on the flop since this guy hadn't been folding to a lot of c-bets, but it's a pretty small sample so far. His range is really wide. He's playing 42% of his hands. We've got a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draws. A lot of times a queen would be good versus his calling range. So given the small sample size and the fact that we have some equity there, and it's not, you know, it's not a board that exactly like crushes his range or anything. I would still go ahead and c-bet there, even though he's been a little bit of a station so far. I think I would just fold the turn versus his big bet there too, because even though you have some implied odds, like you'll be able to get another bet out of him, like when you make a straight on the river and he has 2 pair, or even, you know, 1 pair sometimes. But a lot of times he's ahead of you, and you're gonna chop with the straight also, and that's a really big bet. So I don't know. I'd probably just go ahead and fold there. And again on the top left, this is really more the sort of hand that I would look for a semi-bluffing hand, you know, against a looser, aggressive player, if I do want to semi-bluff him. Just because it's maybe not quite good enough to call with, but it's at the top of that folding range. And with the king queen on the lower right versus kind of aggro looking reg, that's a pretty easy call there. We definitely want to keep in a bunch of dominated hands. King queen does very good against his opening range, but it's not exactly a value raise if we raise there. And we get 3-bet by a guy that's been really tied to this point, so that's going to be a pretty easy give up. Okay, top left, kind of weird spot. This guy's been tight passive so far. We flop a set, and he just checks. I'm still betting there though, and just hoping he has something like king, queens, jacks, and was disappointed, but still check calling. You don't really gain anything by checking there, just because even though it sucks, and it's probably just being a nit and check folding a lot of the times. Like, it's pretty hard for him to go from unhappy on the flop to happy on the turn, so might as well bet to try and get the most out of his, like, marginal stuff that's check calling. Okay, on the upper left, you've got this guy who's been raising a ton of hands. We have position on him with a, suited one gapper. I think that hand plays well enough in position against a really loose range that you can just call there, getting 2-1 in the big blind. I think that's fine. So I don't know. I mean, I don't hate folding there, but I think you can definitely make a profit. His range is obviously very weak, given how much he's been raising. I would expect him to be, maybe even any 2 cards there. So I definitely think your hand plays well enough in position to turn a profit. Here we raise from middle position with a king queen. We get 30-bet by this guy that 3-bet us before. We've got like 170 hands or something on him, and he has a 3-bet of 14. So it's been quite a bit. When he 3-bet us before, we were in late position. Here we're in middle position. So I don't know. Even though he's been 3-betting a decent amount, I think he's still going to have a tighter range here than we're in the cutoff and the button. So I don't really like calling or bluffing here. I just think that his range is, on average, is going to be stronger than normal. A lot stronger than when you're stealing. So I'll probably just give up here with a king-queen. It's not, it's just kind of in the middle of our range for middle position, and I don't know, it's just not great. And we elect a 4-bet bluff. It's not the worst thing ever. We have some blockers, the kings, queens, ace, king, which is, is nuts getting it in range. But at the same time, I think even against guys that 3-bet a decent amount, like in general, people really overestimate their folding equity when 4-betting. Like I know in my own database, like my 4-betting is almost all value, and people folded to my 4-bets like hardly at all, like about a third of the time. It just obviously the more aggressive the opponent is, in general, the more likely they are to fold to a 4-bet. And this guy has been pretty aggressive, but like I say, the fact that you open the middle position, it does change things quite a bit. So I would probably just fold there, but like I say, this isn't exactly the worst bluff ever. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I hope you guys liked the video. If you'd like to have your own poker video reviewed for free, check out the upload tab on my Facebook fan page. If you're interested in personal coaching or have suggestions for future content for the site, email me at opensourcepoker@gmail.com.